Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Thinking Project podcast, where we interview founders and creatives to help you take the next step in your business by listening to inspired stories of these wonderful founders. I hope you enjoy this podcast and make sure to share it with your friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, Josh, thanks so much for being here, man. I appreciate you coming.
Appreciate you letting me be on, man. I appreciate it. I've been a fan of the project.
Yeah, dude, I know when we talked, I really appreciate that. I love all of the times when I get to meet people who really benefited and then get to bring them on to share all their knowledge and expertise, man. So you got a few things going on that we have talked about before this, but yeah, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you got going on, bro.
So my name is Joshua. My last name is Harris, Joshua Harris. I go by Smiley, so some people call me Smiley. But I'm big on empowerment. Helping people manage their ego, set boundaries, and reach their goals. So I have an internship program running right now, and I have a startup as well. So a lot of good things coming in the future. But
cool,
I'm just a person who's about empowerment.
Yeah. So how do you okay, well, before I get into all that, because all that is fascinating, how do you go about tell us about your internship program and what that is, because that's pretty interesting. I like that.
So I come from like working in big box store. I used to like work in retail and work in sales, and I did that for about like the last 5 years. I used to work in like a lot of different jobs, but that's what I just got done doing. So I was like working there. I'm like, they're training me, but they're not training me how I should be trained. So when I got a chance to start my own company, I started it, and it's called the Lighthouse Keeper Program. So the company is called the Lighthouse Portal. So the idea is that these people are the keepers of the facility or the company, quote unquote. So if you were to physically go to a lighthouse, there's not many of them in existence anymore. But the people who maintain that facility aren't called custodians. They're not called maintenance men. They're called keepers. So every individual is a keeper of the lighthouse. So it's like them.
Yeah. Wow, dude.
Yeah.
Hey, I like that name though. I like when a company comes up with a name like that that like means something beyond just like what they're doing and like really like captures the mission of the company, because I think that's
like
something.
A key, right? So it's called a portal because we talk about space and time and everything like that. It's a door. What it leads to for you is what it leads to for you. But if you make the most of it, you're in another galaxy.
Yeah, man. No, I love that, dude. I think that's incredible. So so part of this internship program, what do they do when they come and work for you, work with you? What are they trying to accomplish?
The biggest thing that most people are trying to accomplish is trying to get experience. So for me, the goal is after the company offers you a job, which is the goal, if you stick through it, you also have other jobs lined up. So if you have a more competitive job lined up for you, cool, that's understood. But the goal is for you to have a job offer from more than just me, so that you can kind of leverage that and get the most out of it. The thing is, when you come out of school, like a lot of people don't understand the difference between competence and credential. Like your credential is your credential, but it doesn't mean that you're going to perform well in that job. So
yeah. So how do you teach the difference between credentials and competence? I like that. I like how you put that, because that's really true. Like, yeah, what did Elon Musk say? He said something like, you can still have a bachelor's degree, or you can have a bachelor's degree and still be dumb.
Yeah. So like like common sense. I can't really teach common sense, but I can teach different ways that you can sustain yourself should you get laid off. Having relationships that are worth something. Instilling like those small principles and things that like you use in negotiation. Like when you go to interview, like how much am I gonna get paid for this job? Like having those things, intangibles, just sets you apart It's like this person right here, this person. I'm like, well, this person right here is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, helping
Yeah,
them
that's
stand
cool.
out.
So your background's in sales. Um, tell us more about how you started this company. You know, the Lighthouse Portal. Tell us more about how you
So I used
started
to
that.
also. I'm sorry. Yeah, I used to also be a trainer, right? So this isn't my first
Okay.
company, but I used to be a personal trainer. So,
Okay.
that was a long time ago before I like stopped being on the fitness journey and got more into the health journey. So it doesn't stop, but there's a difference. So um the lighthouse is more something that started because I realized that there's some people who need more help than others, right? So I had a young lady who I was trading one day, and it was like 2 summers ago, right before COVID. She was like, "I want to lose 10 pounds in a month." So he's like, "Josh, let me lose 10 pounds in a month." A month goes by, she loses 6 pounds. She's like, "It's not working out. I want to move on." I'm like, "You didn't do anything I told you. You lost 6 pounds in a month. You should be happy." Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we achieved the goal. Like, and I'm like, damn, I'm like, I care about my clients, I care about people. I'm a genuine person. So I'm like, damn, like, what did I do wrong? Like,
Yeah.
like what what did I do wrong? So I'm like, what can I do to have people who don't trust me or don't want to follow my methodology to be able to still achieve their goals? So that's why I came up with this company. And there's the app I have coming in a web app, but that is
Yeah.
pretty much done. So people will be able to check it out on the site later, but we'll kind of get to that at some point. But
Yeah.
that's where the thought was, like, how do I help the people who can't get out of their own way?
Ooh.
That's, yeah.
And so that's how the Lighthouse Portal started, helping people who can't get out of their own way. That's tough, man. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people don't even know they're in their own way, right? So how do you help people like expand that, right? Like how do you help people understand, what they don't know as far as like being in their own head?
Difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult. Like, it comes into ego, it comes into your background and how you grew up. Like me, my family is a
Yeah.
military background. So, not everybody is military, but like both of my grandfathers were in the military. So like, that comes into like the psychological part of how I do things. So they're very
Hmm.
like, this is how it's supposed to be done. And it doesn't
Right.
always work for people, but understanding the different, thought processes that people have, it
Yeah.
starts with you on the individual level, your boundaries, your ego, just
Yeah.
taking time to do self-development, kind of starts there, knowing what your strengths are, your weaknesses, and, creating a program to follow. So that's kind of like what we do.
Yeah, that's freaking awesome, man. Holy cow. So how how are you tackling this big endeavor of like with the Lighthouse Portal? Like what are some of the things that you do to teach people like how to negotiate better or how to get out of their own way? And like specifically, you mentioned like at the beginning of this, like empowerment, right? Like how do you help empower people? How do you help people feel empowered?
So I have a lot of exercises that I go through in the book that I wrote. I'm trying to still get it out there, but it's called Sink or Swim: 100 Years in a Quarter.
Oh
So
wow.
it's called that because I had two great grandmothers who lived to be a century, right? One was 99, the other one was 102. And
Wow, that's
I
cool,
got to
man.
actually, yeah, man, it's a blessing. I have good genes. I'm just thankful to God, like, for all of that. But I got to meet them and actually talk to them. Like, they passed away when I was like in my teens, right? So I got
Yeah.
to actually speak to them and get wisdom from them. So one of the big things is just that, like, listening to people, like learning to listen before you talk.
Right.
And, just understanding those things is where we start because yeah, like you're not listening to your own body a lot of times. You're not listening to
Mm.
like the reading the room, all of those intangibles. But empowerment really starts with, believing in yourself. Like that's something that I preach. And if people don't believe in themselves, it's really hard for me to work with them. So
Yeah. So does
the,
that how would I say this? So does that disqualify somebody from working with you? Like if you meet them and you go through the whole process and you're like, man, these guys really just have a problem with like, believing in themselves and wanting to work through it, like they're very pessimistic. Do you still try to work with those
so
kinds of people or
I try to give them things to read and like places to start, because if you don't have a belief in yourself, the things that I say are probably gonna go over your head.
Right. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Because the
Um,
toxicity and the boundaries that you have not set for yourself are why you're feeling like that. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Like I've been there. I've been there. I've
Right.
been there. Like if you don't set those boundaries and you like shell off those things, you're gonna go back to having a
Y-
lack of confidence or overcompensating. You
Yeah.
know, going away from who you truly are.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I think that's a big piece for a lot of people. Like if, w- just like being able to help themselves, right? Like we can't help those people who can't help themselves. You can't like, right? Like we can only do so much before you got to figure it out yourself and just start, right? Like that's one of the
Right.
things that I love about my podcast and like the people that I work with is, the big things are not like, of course there's the science of getting from like, you know 0 to a million, or a million to 5 to 10, and all these things in your business. But I've found that the hardest thing to do is just start. Like that's probably the
Thousand
hardest
percent.
thing, right?
Thousand
You know what I'm
percent.
saying? Yeah. And so that's the mental block. That's what the people, people, how people get in their own ways, is they don't like start. So are there things that are there processes or systems that you take people through that help them start?
So like one of my favorite exercises is exercise 8 out of the book.
Hmm.
So you could call it the Mamba mentality exercise. You could call it whatever you want, because that's the number he used to wear, Kobe Bryant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um but basically it's like it's a chart, and then you have your visions, your values, your intentions, and then your passions, right? So you write all of those things out. You write 8 things that fit into each category,
Yeah.
and then you take another look at the list, and you think about where people align with that, and you can
Yeah.
start to see like who in your life matches up, like who are your confidants, who are your constituents, and then who are your comrades, right? So those are
Right.
3
Right.
things that are similar, but they're different. So your confidants are the people who you confide in, your close friends, your partner, your wife, your spouse, your husband.
Uh-huh.
Your constituents are the people who are you know somewhat adversary to you, and then your comrades are the people who are on your team for the mission at hand, right?
Yeah.
So that could be your coworkers, that could be
Cool.
your frenemies, your acquaintances, but putting
Yeah.
people in perspective of where they are for you allows you to have more confidence to your day-to-day decisions. Like, so that's one of the big exercises I like to do. There's a whole bunch more, but that's probably my favorite one.
Yeah, figuring out like who around you, uh yeah, who around you can kind of help you, right? Or like motivate you, kind of thing.
Yeah, because if you have different values than someone else, there's only so much far you guys can go together. If you have
Ooh,
similar
yeah.
values, similar passions, similar intentions, then you could probably
Uh-huh.
go somewhere. But you have to have a check 3 or 4 of those boxes before you can really call somebody a confidant. The goal is to
Yeah.
have as many confidants as possible, but
Yeah.
not all of us are that blessed and lucky.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you, I mean, like, in your life, right? Like writing your book, starting your company, how do you, you talk about values, right? But in my mind, it's like, how do you find out what someone else's values are, and how do you like, how long does that take, or something like that? You know what I mean?
Um, for me, I like to just be open, and understand that people have boundaries. So like there's another analogy I use called the coconut, right, which is like a separate idea in a of itself. So we
Yeah.
have the coconut, we have the husk on the outside of the coconut, which you usually don't see, and then we have the shell, right? So I'm not from the Caribbean, but I have a lot of friends and people who are, right? So they'll tell you
Yeah.
that you can eat the outside shell of the coconut. A lot of people will toss it, but they
Yeah.
use it and they use that to make the oil. So that's a similar analogy of like people have shells for a reason. So, taking the time to find the things that are pain points or things that people don't want to talk about, understanding those, and then, understanding those for yourself, it'll allow you to, like, kind of break into that shell. But the outside part, the husk, is, the having the real conversations about things that are not necessarily, fun to have, or like ideal. The small talk. Small talk is good for certain things, but you have to have real conversations if you want to build a real relationship with someone.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that's so true, man.
Like skimming
I
the
think,
BS.
yeah. I it's always fun, like when you talk about, when we end up talking about like how do you connect with people and who, you know what I mean, who do you connect with and all these things, because it becomes, it can get very like, waters can become very muddy, right? But I like your analogy of the shell, like you can use every part, right? And there's a reason for that, and so like tap into it, right? I think one of my favorite quotes, or whatever you want to call it, is from Marcus Aurelius. He's an old Stoic, but he would say, um, what what blocks the way, or what impedes the way, becomes the way, right? Like,
Mm.
the thing that prevents action will also like enable action. Um, and it's just that same idea, like working with people, like, you definitely set good boundaries, and we don't have to work with everybody, we don't have to be friends with everybody, but there's that, but there is that, that part of life when you use those, like those things that might be, undesirable in someone else, can actually be like a benefit, and you can like, you can really like help somebody hone in on things, or like, the example that's coming to my head is like Abraham Lincoln. And there was a biography a biography written on Abraham Lincoln called The Team of Rivals. And Abraham Lincoln only had in his presidential cabinet people that vehemently disagreed with him, and like other parties and things like that, because he knew that they wouldn't, like, there was no reason for them to lie to him, because they didn't like him already, right? Like, so it was this kind of thing where like you had this radical candor and this radical honesty, because like, I don't like you anyway, nothing I say is gonna, you know what I mean, like I don't
Yeah.
care if you don't like me, right? And so President Lincoln had these, and I'm not a politics guy, but I thought it was interesting the way that he chose to approach leadership, with the idea of like, surrounding himself with people that disagreed with him on a lot of
No, I
things,
definitely do the same thing. I try to do that and have conversations with people who have different ideologies that oppose mine, because
Yeah,
the only thing you can do from that is grow. There's no
right,
real
right.
downside. Like, no,
Yeah.
nothing bad is really gonna come from it, except, maybe somebody starts
No,
yelling, but it's like,
sure. But that's also, but like, that going into the relationship or the connection, right? Like, these people really disagree with me. So, I'm not gonna like, that, and that also sets up your mind for a great, that
delivery.
sets up, yeah, like it just sets up your whole mind, like set to, so that you don't get like caught off guard or distracted. You're like, yeah, this guy already doesn't like me, so this will, you know what I mean, this is going to be really fun, and we're going to learn, and I'm not going to take, everything he says is going to be taken with a grain of salt and things like that, right? I just think I think that's pretty cool, man. I like that, dude. So tell us more about your book, man.
So to the example that you gave, I actually have a small piece where I reference a guy named Fred Hampton, who actually did similar, where
Yeah.
he actually was a leader of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, and he sat down with the KKK. So this is probably the thing that got him, assassinated, because he was speaking to people who were adversaries, and he was enlightening them on the fact that they were in a similar situation as he was. So, like, the
Oh
book, I
no.
talk about a lot of different things, but
Yeah.
um the idea of, speaking to people who have different viewpoints as you, um fits into the grand scheme of like having longevity, because, like Caesar or anybody you think about in history who, like, was taken out, was because they had yes men but with them, and people who would just, be like, yeah, so, like, you got to have people to check in and keep it honest with you, keep it real with you. So
Yeah, yeah.
the book was inspired by yeah, I'm just trying to
Right.
spread the
Yeah.
knowledge.
Have you read that book? I mean, I don't know. It's a very polarizing book, but have you read 48 Laws of Power? You ever read
Yes,
that book?
yes, I have. I
Yeah.
have. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Great,
very good
great
book.
book. In there, he talks about the same thing. Like, enemies are actually probably better in your corner than than your friends
Yeah,
for
that's
that
probably
reason,
why he
right?
got. That's probably why he got taken out because he was uniting the poor people, quote unquote. So it's like, we have to
Yeah,
do
that's
something about it.
right.
You know?
Like, yeah, that book's banned in prisons, right? It's banned in
Exactly.
prisons, and I think it's banned in some schools too. Like,
Yeah.
because they're like, it's, but I don't know. I've read a lot of Robert Greene's other books. Like, first, like, let me say, like, first of all, that book is great. Everybody
It's
should read
great.
that book. And when
For
he did the
sure. You
book with
definitely.
when he did the book with 50 Cent, have you read the 50th Law?
I didn't read it yet. No, I haven't.
Dude, that's a great book too. He met with,
I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna check it out.
yeah, dude. He, like, him, it's just so awesome. He wrote a book with 50 Cent, Curtis Lee Jackson, and like that whole book just breaks down some of the coldest capitalist principles in the world. You know what I mean? Just like because that was the book that Curtis Jackson, that 50 Cent read to help him start releasing and Get Rich or Die Trying. That helped him formed, in Curtis's words, like G Unit. And dude, who I mean, yeah, what chart wasn't Get Rich or Die Trying on? I'm still, by
Yeah,
the
I was
way,
on every chart, Billboard chart, every one of them. Yeah,
I'm
that's
still mad.
that's
I'm
a.
still mad that he lost to Nelly, but that was a great song. So
It
whatever.
still went diamond. I mean, diamond is crazy. Diamond is
Yeah.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
a
No.
different type of.
There's levels.
But
That's when you learn about levels, right, dude?
for sure, it's definitely levels. So like the
Yeah.
book, I'm definitely trying to get it out there. The thought process is
Yeah.
empower people and give that wisdom as far as longevity. Who knows how long we'll be here, but I feel like
Right.
I've lived a century in the 25 years I've been here. So that's why it's called 100 years and a quarter. So it's just the game that I got from the older heads.
Yeah, dude. Well,
It's-
like, it's true, because that's why I like talking to anybody, right? It doesn't matter if like younger or older, and like I don't know how old you are, but it doesn't matter to me, because it's not so much about, like, experience has a lot to do with this, but what people, I feel like, don't understand a lot of the times is you can get a lot of experience in a short amount of time depending on the situation you're in, right? Like, I
you
learned how
gotta
to
be
close.
vulnerable. You gotta be willing to put yourself in a situation.
Yeah, dude. I learned how to close deals really well because early in my career, I had the opportunity to be a closer in a position that I was at. And so, a normal salesperson in that field would maybe would maybe have the opportunity to close, 10 or 15 deals a month. And I was in a position where I was closing, 10 or 15 deals a day. And you learn quicker when you are closing 10 or 15 in
Embrace
a
the
day versus
rejection.
a month. Yeah. Well, like, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just like that experience. It's like, it takes me a shorter amount of time to get there, because like we don't have, like, I don't have the time in between closes to like go read a bunch of books or something. Like, I got to find a mentor and like figure out how to make this work, right? So a lot of my experience comes from like but like I haven't, like, but it's not a lot of time, right? Like, the timeline isn't big, but the experience is big, right? Kind of what you're saying. You
Yeah,
get
like
that? Yeah.
something I talk about in the book also is like the concept of being the youngest person in the room, right? So
Right.
like not physically but mentally. Like
Oh,
children, little
sure.
kids, you have kids, right? They ask a lot of questions. They ask questions and they get information. So keep holding on to that youthfulness will take you a long way. Um, like being able to ask those questions and just like even when I'm talking to people who are younger, I'm definitely younger than you, but when I'm talking to people who are younger,
Uh-huh.
the same thing, like trying to just, be on the same level with them as far as like asking questions and getting knowledge. So
Yeah. Yeah,
um
dude. I think, yeah, and it's kind of one of those things. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can learn from anybody. Like, it's not necessarily about the experience. And that's what I think is beautiful about real leaders. Like, it doesn't matter who they're talking to, like, they're going to learn something from them. And I think that's one of my indicators of like a true. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Othership. Othership is a meditation and breathwork app that I've been using forever to cool down, to calm down, to energize, to start my day, to end my day, and everything in between. They have bite-sized exercises that are accompanied with music to help you and your breath go along with the beat so that it makes meditation and breathwork fun and easy. They have minute-long sessions or hour-long sessions, so you can go for as little or as long as you like to fit with your schedule. Breathwork, it has changed my life. Othership has changed my life. You guys won't regret this. Robbie Bent was on my podcast before. He's an amazing human being. He's got an amazing team. Go check out this app. The link to everything are in the description below. And I promise it'll be the best thing you've ever done. Thank you so much. A truly like humble person or like empathetic person, a true leader is like, sure, like I'm not saying, yeah, kind of like you, right? Like, you know, you don't only learn from people with less experience, but like to be able to walk into a room and learn from anything because your mind is in the right place because you don't have an ego, like that's a really cool thing. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people miss that. So dude, but it's crazy, man. I think yeah, I think it's just wild that we get it because like, you know, the coaching world, for example, or like, you know, just teaching in general, right? Like, you know, going through an MBA program, you're like, but what, you know, what I was surprised about, and this is goes back to just like teaching or whatever. Everybody kind of talks about like school teachers and MBA teachers like not doing what they teach or whatever. I found the opposite in my program. A lot of the teachers that I had, a lot of the professors I had in my MBA program were like like they had a pedigree, they had a resume, dude. Those guys were very, very talented. And I just thought it was funny, like just all of these crazy misconceptions of like learning, right? And I get where they're coming from. I get where they're coming from in the sense that like school is, you know, way too expensive. I agree with that. But anyway, it's just wild, dude. But that's the other thing is like either way you pay almost, right? Like you either pay with time and reading or you pay with money to go to college. You know what I'm saying?
Like for me, I don't have the formal education, so for me,
Sure.
it's been I had a lot of crash course, just asking people questions and conversations, and also finding a way to balance the lack of desire to ask for help. As your growth in
Right.
business grows from a solo person to a legitimate like business, you have to be willing to open the doors to other people for help and trust and stuff like that. So like school is good for that purpose to be
Yeah.
able to get those things where you can trust these people. But
Yeah.
it's really that's a really big fundamental concept, trust. Like
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, yeah, funny how, well, I mean, and here's the thing, like I don't think you need for there are certain things that you need a college degree for or that would really help. There's some things that you don't. I think sales, negotiation, like those kinds of things you don't need to go to college for. I really don't even think you need to go to college for business, but like I said,
the
you don't really
resources
need to.
that they have,
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of they like open your mind. They give you experience. So it's
the
like,
books,
okay, that's fair.
the access to the libraries. You don't just get that by yourself. The internet search isn't going to show you the what do we call
Well,
it? The clinical studies and stuff. You're not
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
get that. Yeah,
Well,
nah.
and here's the crazy part. I mean, even if they did, like sometimes they do. Some of those studies you can go and get. But here's the thing. It just goes back to this idea that I was talking about earlier, like you don't know what you don't know, right? Like it's not about, so I have always been a proponent, and some people really disagree with me on this, but I've always been a proponent that the world is going to kind of come full circle. Like social media is going to come full circle because right now, why do we love social media and the internet? Well, because you have access to everything. Like knowledge is free, and that's beautiful, and that's so empowering. Knowledge is free. We get into this process though that when you have too many options, you don't make any choices. See what I'm saying? And
The kid in
so
the candy store, right?
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, you have all of these things. So you don't, if you have one choice, you'll make a decision. If you have 50 choices, you're not going to make a decision. So, like, yeah, that's a principle in negotiation, right? Like, don't give a person, don't give who your sorry, don't give who the person you're negotiating with more too many options.
Yeah, you go into
De-
time paralysis. Time
yeah,
paralysis is definitely in coaching also it's a real thing. Also, like coaching,
yeah,
training people, time
yeah,
paralysis is a deadly thing as far
right,
as
dude.
your progress. It's
So
definitely
yeah, so my idea, this is my theory, is that eventually social media becomes more comes full circle, because it won't be so much about content creation as it will be about content curation, right? Like creating, like, our social media pages might still be for, like, authentic content or whatever, but like, what is that really in these days, right? Like, you just find a million ways to say the same thing, whatever. But like, eventually it will become like a place where you can go, like Dalton, or Joshua's known for sales, right? So your page is a curation of all these different sales, of all this sales knowledge that might not necessarily be coming from like me or you, but like, you're introducing people to new ideas through other people. And I know it sounds wild, but I think it's
no,
like,
it
I think it's
doesn't. It
part of
doesn't.
it,
It
you know what I
doesn't. It
mean?
doesn't sound wild at all. You're making sense because like right, the whole thing about the censorship initiative that's going forward is going to force people to be self-sustainable and have their own platforms. So
Right,
like some of the things are relevant that they don't want, put out to the masses because people are not giving them all of the information. But
right.
like if someone wants to get the information, it's there at this point for them to go see it. So, you know, for me, when it comes to things that are sensitive that, certain companies might not want talked about, I just want to make it where you provoke the question, right? I want you
Yeah,
to ask questions. I want people to think about, like similar
yeah,
to your project, right? Like the thinking project. Think about it,
yeah.
right? Don't
Think
I
about
don't
it,
have the
yeah.
answers. I don't have all the answers. Just I want you to go ahead and ask yourself, like, what's going on here? Like deeper. Just go
Yeah,
deeper, bro.
yeah. But it's true though. But it's true because, like, that's why I named it the thinking project, because a lot of this is like just getting people to understand and like think that, one of the big theses of the podcast is like, like, the thinking project is also like, don't think about it too much. like
Yeah,
like just
exactly.
start, dude, you know what I mean? Like,
Word.
there's both ends of the spectrum where you need to like think differently, and yeah, really think about it. But then there's also times about with thought that, like, don't think about it too much, like, don't overthink it, don't overcomplicate it, get out of your way. Like, one of my favorite, and it's gonna be like, what, closes or something, I don't know, I don't really use it a lot, but I do like the question of like, um you know it's not, you don't need to think about it, right? Like when someone says I need to think about it, right? You go, okay, well, I totally understand you need to think about it, but typically in my
That works.
experience, what?
That's worked in my experience. It's worked. That one you don't need to think about it. You already know.
Yeah. I go, typically in my experience, it's not so much about thinking about it, it's about information. So if you don't have enough information to make a decision, then let me help you, because I'm the person with all the information, right? So let's go back. Like, what else do you need to know? And that usually works, right? Like, because yeah, I mean, it's not about thinking, it's about information. And so that's another part of it, right? Like, the thinking project brings people information so that they can stop thinking, right? And like, go,
Your
and
gut. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
move. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to the name, but and then bringing people on, like yourself, it's about like what I do. If you say something, if somebody hears this, and you say something and it triggers a thought, and they're like, oh, you know what, that's what I needed, and then they move, right? Like, that's it, that's the thinking project right there.
Like
That's
one
all
of
I
the
need to
one of
do.
the other key concept I'm gonna just like leave
Yeah,
the
go ahead,
rest for
man.
people to go read it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna leave the rest for people to go read it, but like a concept, and it was part of like the censorship thing, right? Is
Yeah.
prevention above curation, or not curation, that's the wrong word, I'm sorry. Above curing something, right?
Oh yeah.
So like
Yeah.
we are caught up in the loop right now of trying to cure something after the fact, but you go to a doctor, you go to a fireman, you go to a police officer, and you say, what's the best way to fix the issue, right? Fix
Yeah.
having a disease, fix a robbery, fix a fire. They're gonna say
Yeah.
prevent one from happening, right? So
Yeah.
we're on the in the reactionary phase of how we try to solve issues as a whole most of the time,
Mm,
instead of the progressive or preventionary role. So like,
yeah.
avoid that from happening, we have less problems.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah. Another way to put that is like being proactive instead of reactive, like finding ways to like keep going. You know what I mean? Well, cool, Joshua, dude. This has been an amazing conversation, man. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your wisdom. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you, where they can find more about your companies, and get involved if they want to get involved.
So you can check me out at progressneverstops.com, or the lighthouseportal.com is loading. It's gonna be up in the next week or so. So Progress Never Stops is a good place to go. You can check me out, and you can hit me up on um LinkedIn, or my email at support at Progress Never Stops, or support at Lighthouse. So
Oh,
um
that's awesome, bro.
yeah, man.
That's awesome, dude. All right, cool, man. Well, like I said, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here, bro.
Thanks, man.